Dr. Cheyenne Bryant recently appeared on the Joe Button podcast. Before the conversation got into the deeper topics, the host started by asking about her background, who she is, where she comes from, and how she got to where she is today. Then the conversation turned to her educational background and credentials. Now, this wasn't information she was required to share, but Dr. Bryant, never one to hold back, went ahead and put it all on the table.
A license.
And why
Right now I'm in
wouldn't
private
You're
practice.
making all the money now.
That's what I'm saying. And that's what people don't understand, right? So just to educate some folks a little bit, a license is really only needed so you can bill insurance. And let me go a step further. Majority of people who know that in order to bill insurance as a therapist or a physician or a psychologist, psychiatrist, you have to diagnose.
Okay.
Most people don't want to have a diagnosis on their record. So what do they rather do? Pay out of pocket.
Now, here's where things get important. She doesn't hold a license, and the reason that matters is because a license is what allows a practitioner to bill insurance, perform clinical diagnoses, and provide certain regulated services. That's the core purpose of licensure in this field. So, the way her practice appears to work is that she uses her audience to bring in clients directly. People visit her website and pay out of pocket. No insurance involved, no licensed clinical framework behind it. But then she says something that shifts the conversation entirely.
Is a way that, as a therapist, two things, you can obviously make what you deserve because therapy is real. We're giving everything we have in there.
During the conversation, she used the word therapy, specifically saying that therapists deserve to earn as much money as possible. That word choice matters. She said it herself, unprompted. And that's exactly what other licensed professionals began pushing back on. Because in order to legally call yourself a therapist and practice as one, there are specific requirements. A licensed clinical psychologist or therapist typically needs a doctoral degree, whether that's a PsyD, a PhD in psychology, or a degree in psychiatry. These aren't minor technicalities. They're the foundation of what makes someone qualified to work with people's mental health. Now, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant uses the title doctor, which naturally leads people to assume a certain level of clinical qualification. But her educational background has been called into question. According to publicly available information, she attended the University of Phoenix and Galati University, neither of which are accredited institutions recognized for producing licensed mental health practitioners. Her documented credential is a bachelor's degree in psychology, which alone does not qualify someone to practice as a therapist. And here's where it gets even more telling. On the Joe Budden podcast, she used the word therapy openly, but if you go to her actual website, the services listed are described as coaching, not therapy. That distinction isn't accidental. Coaching is an unregulated space. By framing her services as coaching rather than therapy, she stays outside the legal boundaries that would otherwise expose her to professional liability and potential lawsuits. She goes on podcasts and speaks openly about mental health treatment, but when you actually go to book a session with her, what you find listed is coaching. And those prices, all of them, are for coaching services. Here's why that distinction is a serious problem. When a professional is licensed by a board, they are held accountable to a specific set of standards. To use a simple example, someone could attend medical school and still not be a licensed practitioner. And if that person goes around offering medical advice without board registration, there's no system in place to protect the people receiving that advice. But if they are licensed and something goes wrong, a patient has somewhere to turn. They can file a complaint with the relevant board, a state medical board, a board of family physicians, whichever applies. That board has the authority to investigate, penalize, and protect the public. That's the entire point of licensing. It creates accountability. It enforces confidentiality standards. It ensures that practitioners follow an established code of care. In short, it protects consumers. Licensed boards exist specifically to prevent situations like this one, where someone presents themselves as a therapist in public but quietly labels their services as coaching to avoid legal exposure. And the consequences of that gap can be very real. What happens when someone struggling with bipolar disorder, depression, or any other serious mental health condition pays hundreds of dollars for a session believing they're receiving professional care? Even if Dr. Cheyenne Bryant were able to recognize the signs of a clinical condition, the reality is straightforward. Because she is unlicensed, she cannot legally diagnose anyone. She cannot legally treat anyone, and there is no board that can hold her accountable if something goes wrong. Someone dealing with bipolar disorder doesn't need coaching, they need clinical care. It's the same as someone showing signs of cancer going to see an unlicensed doctor. When that conversation ends, nothing has changed. No diagnosis, no treatment plan, no real path forward. They leave in the exact same position they arrived in, except now they've lost time that actually mattered. Proper diagnosis exists for a reason. It opens the door to real treatment. And then there's the argument she made about why people avoid getting diagnosed in the first place. Her reasoning? That having a diagnosis on your record could hurt your chances of getting a job.
That claim doesn't hold up. Employers do not have access to your medical records during the hiring process. That's not how background checks work. What employers can access is your criminal record, which is public by design. They can verify your employment history, check whether you're eligible for rehire at previous jobs, and look into gaps in your work timeline. But your medical history? That remains private. It's protected. So that argument falls apart under basic scrutiny. This conversation has been building for days now, and it's reached a point where people are openly calling Dr. Cheyenne Bryant out across social media. One post that gained traction put it bluntly. She talks openly about accessible therapy, yet she has no license, and her session prices for just 50 minutes left many asking, accessible to whom exactly? And when she posted a link directing followers to book a session, the comments section told its own story. One user asked whether their insurance would cover it, a question that cuts right to the heart of the issue. Because the answer, of course, is no. Insurance doesn't cover unlicensed coaching sessions marketed through the language of therapy. And what's becoming clearer through all of this is that Dr. Bryant appears unconcerned by the criticism, at least based on how she continues to present and position herself publicly. A post was circulating that referred to her as Cheyenne Bryant, M.S., implying she holds a master's degree. Someone in the comments quickly flagged it. According to them, she doesn't hold a master's degree at all. She dropped out and only completed a bachelor's degree. So if that's accurate, here's what the credential picture actually looks like. A BA in psychology and a doctoral degree from Argosy University, an institution that has faced serious accreditation issues and is widely questioned in terms of the legitimacy of the degrees it issued. That combination raises real concerns. They don't realize they may not be getting the help they genuinely need. And in some cases, they may be causing themselves harm by substituting real clinical care with something that carries none of the protections or qualifications that care requires. There's another pattern worth pointing out when it comes to Dr. Cheyenne Bryant's podcast appearances. She predominantly shows up on Black men's podcasts, not Black women's platforms, mostly Black men's. And that's an interesting choice, especially considering the nature of the conversations she tends to have there. Because on those shows, she regularly holds Black men accountable. Infidelity, children born outside of committed relationships, patterns of behavior she dissects and critiques openly, and the hosts largely sit there and take it. That dynamic is worth paying attention to. Now, when it comes to Paul Pierce's platform, there's some grace to extend there. He was building his show, and he may genuinely not have known the full picture of her credentials. That's understandable. But the broader pattern remains. She positions herself as an authority who holds others accountable, specifically Black men, while appearing on their platforms and benefiting from their audiences. And then comes the moment that made a lot of people stop cold. When confronted directly about representing herself as a therapist, her response was striking. She said she doesn't need a license because she's not a therapist. Her words were that she is a psychology expert and life coach. Think about that for a moment. The same person who openly used the word therapy on a major podcast and whose entire public brand is built around mental health guidance is now saying she never claimed to be a therapist at all.
Now, some people pushed back and said the criticism had crossed into hate. But there's another layer to this conversation that deserves attention, and it points directly at the podcasters platforming her. Club Shay Shay, Nick Cannon, Cam Newton, The Breakfast Club, the Joe Budden podcast. These are major platforms with massive audiences. And here's the uncomfortable truth about how big podcasts operate. Guests get booked based on the numbers they bring. Engagement, clicks, attention, that's the currency. What doesn't always factor into that decision is whether the guest is putting the public at risk. Because from the podcaster's perspective, the thinking is simple. If someone goes and books a session with her believing she's a licensed professional, that's not their responsibility. They had her on to talk. What the audience does with it is on them. And here's the thing. Dr. Cheyenne Bryant is genuinely convincing. She is articulate, polished, and compelling. Even if a host disagrees with her on air, the simple act of having her on the show extends a level of credibility to her that's hard to take back. That's the power of platform association. When someone appears on a show as big as Club Shay Shay, the audience doesn't fact-check the guest's credentials. What they see is that she's sitting in the same seat where Cat Williams sat, where Marlon Wayland sat, where Michael Beasley sat. Established, recognized names, all considered legitimate. So the natural assumption becomes, if she's on there too, she must be legitimate as well. The same logic applies to the Joe Budden podcast. That show has a reputation for not platforming fraudulent voices. So when she appears there, listeners take that as an endorsement, even if no endorsement was ever intended. And that's the real danger hiding underneath all of this. The people actually paying for her services aren't sitting around researching accreditation standards. They're thinking, my therapist is Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. She's been on Club Shay Shay. She must know what she's doing.
It also is a way that, as a therapist, two things, you can obviously make what you deserve because therapy is real. We're giving everything we have.